For this demo, we're going to see how we can leverage dynamic product data for personalization using Customer-O and Make. Now for this demo, we're actually going to start off in our database, which in this example is an Airtable base, but this is going to work exactly the same whether this is product data living in Salesforce or living in an actual database like maybe a Postgres or a MongoDB or a MySQL database. Now the scenario here is it's an online record shop, and basically every week the editorial team select 6 new release albums that the marketing team should feature. So for instance, this might mean for the social media team that they need to make social media posts about all 6 of these albums, make the creatives, and so on and so forth. But for the email marketing team, what this means is that every week they're sending out a newsletter, and these are the 6 albums that should get featured. Now, traditionally, what the email marketer needed to do was that basically they would go in and manually edit the email every week, download these 6 album images, update the artist and the album name in the email, and this would be a recurring task every week. But thanks to Customer-O, they have quite a neat solution for this. So when we go into our Customer-O under the content area of our workspace, you can see this area collections. And what you need to think about, a collection is basically almost like a mini database or spreadsheet that lives within your Customer-O workspace and will allow us to, let's say, put some dynamic data, which can then be used in emails. So the data is added here. So for instance, we have the link for the album art, we have the album name, the artist, and the release date. And then in our Customer-O workflows, we can actually access this data by using a query collection step. So in this workflow, it's a demo workflow. Every time the demo dynamic data trigger event is triggered, we want to query a collection, and the collection that we're going to query is the albums. And then you can basically take whatever data you want from that collection and add it to the user's attribute. So whichever user is currently going through this workflow, that data from the collection will be saved to an attribute. And this can then be used inside the email. If we look here, so customer.demo album list, and here we have the different attributes, and even the images will be dynamic based on the dynamic URL of the album art. So let's see this once in action. I'm just going to go on to my Customer-O profile. And I'm going to trigger that event that's going to trigger the workflow. And then we should see, hopefully I will have a new attribute created, this demo album list attribute, and I will receive that email. So let's now go and send an event. This is going to be demo dynamic data. And we'll give it a moment and then refresh the page. And we can see now the event dynamic data was triggered. We had an attribute change. So now all of a sudden this album list profile attribute has been filled in. And you can see this is a very large JSON file, which is containing those 6 albums that I should be recommended. And if I now go back to that email and I can preview it with my user, you can see now that this is dynamically being filled in based on those 6 artists. Now, what happens if, for instance, the editorial team is making some changes? Let's, for instance, say, sorry, Tom Odell, you're going to miss out, but we need to get the Queen J-Lo involved in the featured albums. Now, typically what you can do in Customer-O is basically update this collection, and you can manually upload a CSV or connect it to a Google Sheet. This is already a lot quicker than obviously going into that email and editing each element, but thanks to Make, we can automate this even further. So I have a Make scenario here, and what this one is doing is the first step is looking up the Airtable records. So it's just a basic search of my database, in this case Airtable, saying return me all albums where the feature and marketing column is true. So we know we have 6 albums selected, and we can see here in Make the 6 bundles, and there she is, the Queen Jennifer Lopez is now one of them. And what we are doing is we're making an API call to Customer-O. Unfortunately, right now, the actions in Customer-O, we cannot interact with collections. So we have to use this make an API call action. But when we look at the documentation from the Customer-O docs, we can see here under collections, we have some options. We can update a collection and we can even update the contents of a collection. And what we see is all we need to do is send a payload, which is a JSON of the new contents of the collection. And in Make, thanks to the aggregate to JSON action, we can take these 6 bundles from Airtable. I'm just going to run this once so you can see what's happening. So we've got 6 bundles coming from Airtable. These are now being aggregated into one long JSON string because we're using the aggregate to JSON function, and the fields that I'm aggregating on are the artist, album art URL, album name, and release date. And then we are updating the collection. So all we're doing is make an API call. It's already authenticated to the collections endpoint. We can see from the documentation, all we need to edit is this collection ID. And to find that one out, when we go into our customer collection, you can actually see that ID is exposed here in the URL. If you had more than one collection, whenever you click on a collection, you can see the ID here. So we're making an API call to update this collection. And then all we need to put in is map that JSON string that's created in this step. So now if I run this again for my user, let's again trigger the demo dynamic data event. I'm going to refresh the page. And we can see again, this has been triggered and we have another email. Let me go over to my email provider and check if that's come through. And we can see here it is. Now this email has just been sent, and we can see now this is with the updated collection data with Jennifer Lopez in there. Really, this is just a great workflow to make our lives as marketers a lot easier, and will basically removes those boring, repetitive tasks that we don't like doing and allows us to focus on the more creative stuff like building new automations.